I've never seen it all put together. But I have, and I've even learned, like I said, I understand that sometimes when you look for mentorship or you look for it, sometimes what you get is not what to do, you get what not to do.
Hello and welcome to Onyx Rising's conversation series, Inclusive Leadership, where leadership meets inclusion, one conversation at a time. As always, we are here to educate, engage, and inspire you to create inclusive and forward-thinking workplaces. I am your host, Kelli Lester, and today we're having a conversation about inclusive leadership with our esteemed guest. Hi, and welcome to Inclusive Leadership Series. My name is Kelli Lester with Onyx Rising, and today we have none other than John Girton Jr. in the studio with me today to talk about inclusive leadership. So, John Girton, as if we didn't know each other, talk to me about what you do, which I know could be a whole conversation there, and how you make an impact on the world.
Okay, what I do a lot of things, and for those who follow me on social media, they've seen the challenge of doing a lot of things, but I've always been this way. I've always done multiple things. So what I've had to reckon with is, even though I do various things like leadership in churches, or I pastor, or I preach, or I teach, I'm also executive. I've been an executive. I'm in higher education. I'm also an entrepreneur. I have been a solopreneur, which hopefully people understand what that means. There's definitely a difference between the two. But then I'm a father. I'm a community advocate. I'm a person that is willing to sacrifice for people and be their voice. And so what I've had to reckon with is that even though I do all those things, fundamentally, I'm a communicator. That's what I do. I communicate, and I use the various creative outlets that I have and the talent that God has given me to funnel through that gift of communication, where I can, again, use what I have to be a blessing to not just the kingdom, but the kingdom and all of those who are a part of that. And I see everybody as a part of the kingdom in one way or the other. Some people are in it, some people are on their way, some people are in and out. And, but my role is to communicate so that people can reconnect with the purpose and the destiny that God has on their lives.
Yeah, I love it how you're using your gifts, right, or your calling, right, to fuel your purpose, right? And how, which I'm not surprised given your background, how you've created a brand around that. But for the audience, let's define that entrepreneur versus solopreneur. What is that?
It's simple. An entrepreneur is a person who builds a business, often to sell it, to work on it and not in it. An entrepreneur builds a business that may have multiple employees, multiple offices, things like that. A solopreneur is someone who does everything themselves. They may be a consultant with contractors or whatever, but they don't hire other people. So when they answer that question, how many employees do you have? They always say one, and that is them. It's funny because I see people all the time say, I'm a CEO. And it's like, well, if you're a solopreneur, you're not a CEO. You're an owner. And that's it. You just own the thing. But you're not a chief operating officer because you don't have any other chief anything. You are everything. The COO, the CFO, the CEO, the CTO, the CIO. You are all that. And that's what a solopreneur is. And what I try to help people understand is that when you're going to do business, you have to decide before you get too far what you want to do and where you want to be. There are some people that they are best suited as a solopreneur. or the industry that they're in is best suited for solopreneurship. And there are other industries, whether, service or whatever, where an entrepreneur is a better fit for you. But you have to be a team player. You have to be able to delegate. You have to be okay with other people doing things and not you doing them yourself, things like that in order to be an entrepreneur.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that clarity. So today's topic is about inclusive leadership. Before I get into that, though, talk to me about how you would describe your leadership style.
My leadership style is very sacrificial. I will never send someone someplace that I won't myself go.
I love it.
I will lead by example, to a fault. I will, there's no one, I can guarantee you, if anybody that has ever been anywhere near my leadership that's watching this right now, they will endorse this message and say that, my goal is to build people for their futures. They're not working for me, if you will. They are working with me in that moment so that I might be able to pour into them so that once they move beyond me, they can be truly prepared for whatever the next assignment is. Now that is still not a one-way trip. I believe I receive as much as I give, providing that person understands the true nature of my leadership, because I'm the first that would tell you, man, I don't know. I have no idea. I don't know what to do. I don't know how this is going to happen. I don't know how we're going to fix this. I'll be the first to say that. And sometimes people that you are leading don't understand that even the leader often has to go find guidance and perspective. And so that's part of my leadership style is transparency and helping people to understand that I don't have all the answers. I do believe that everything, and if you went to my desk or you went around, people would tell you I have Rubik's Cubes everywhere, because I see everything in leadership as a Rubik's Cube. And if you know a Rubik's Cube, it's easy to mess a Rubik's Cube up. It don't take no time to mess it up. And only certain people know how to solve it. And some people can solve it in 5 minutes. Some people can solve it in 30 seconds. So the key to leadership in that respect for me is that as a leader, you're always going to be presented with Rubik's Cube problems. The solution is that every Rubik's Cube can be solved depending on whose hands you put it in. And so long as you have the right network or the right relationships or the right people around you who have the expertise and the understanding and the experiences that they need, you put that situation in their hands, they might be able to give you 30 seconds to save you 30 years.
That's beautiful. So this kind of brings me right to what obviously I value as my life's work is inclusion and inclusive leadership. So even as you talked about that, the right hands, I picked up on that. So this giving back to and investing in people. And you talked about understanding what you're good at and what you're not, which is a huge transition in terms of like when we got out of Ball State back in the early 90s, right? It was more of a command and control style of leadership. It was the leaders should know the answer. But what you just described is an empowering approach with your people, being clear what you don't know and then finding that expertise. So as you think about the concept of inclusive leadership, how would you define it? And then talk about what I like to call is our inclusive leader moment. And this could be a moment that you reflected on a role model that you've once had that was an inclusive leader, or something you've demonstrated yourself or seen recently. So again, how would you define inclusive leadership? And then talk about an inclusive leadership moment.
Let me start with the moment. The moment was in 2007, 2008. I started out as an adjunct instructor at Tennessee State University. Tennessee State's communications department wanted to hire me, but what they wanted to hire me for wasn't available at the time. And so I had to be patient. And so while I was doing that, I was also at ITT Tech teaching multimedia and instructional design. I was very, very, very early years of that discipline. And eventually a young lady was hired. Eventually I was hired. They got the studio done. Come on. We want you to be the TV operations manager and an instructor. Cool. Moved into my little office right across the hall from the classroom. And now I'm teaching and helping basically do some of the things you talked about earlier, like teaching people how to do, studio work, X, Y, and Z. And a young lady was hired. And when she found out where I was, that I was just teaching and managing a studio, she was like, oh no, we can't have that. We need you to move out of there and come into administration because you have gifts that these folk don't know about. And I was like, okay. So she worked it out. Once I moved into administration, that's where the breakdown happened. And this is why I do what I do today. Because I was in an organization and positioned in such a way that the people who were to provide leadership, I would say, failed at first understanding the people you're working with, their styles, their aspirations, who they are as individuals. The leader that I had, the vice president I had at that time, clearly, unlike the young lady that came in and said, wait, whoa.
Right, you need to be over here.
You need to be here. That was not the case. And to be quite honest, that created a 15-year gap in my executive leadership experience.
Wow.
Because I left there from administration and I went to Ball State, which I ended up going back into the classroom. All this other kind of stuff happened.
Right.
And I didn't get back to it until 2020.
Wow. So you're saying because of the lack of awareness around putting the right people in the right seats on the bus. Understanding
who you got.
Your audience, your constituency, your talent.
Correct.
That you lost X amount of years to be in leadership, not to mention the impact on income, your family, and the likes. Yeah.
And I actually went back into higher education at the same spot I left 10, 12, 13, 14 years prior to.
Right.
And so my pledge to myself was that I would never do that to another person. So I always challenge my people to articulate for me, what do you want?
Yes.
Where are you going?
Yes.
What are you missing? What do you need? How is this working out for you, if that makes sense?
Yeah.
So that I can understand, am I doing the right thing as your leader and positioning you, whether, so inclusivity to me is not just race and ethnicity and gender. It's also goals and aspirations. And I've got some people that want to be in executive leadership. I got some people that I want to be an executive assistant for the rest of my life. And so to me, I'm like, okay, so let's position you to be the best executive assistant you can be, because that's what you want to do.
Right.
If that's what you want to do, great. Right. But if you tell me I want to ultimately be the president of a university, we need to now put you on a track that's going to get you there and surround you with the people that give you what you need for where you're going and not just for where you are.
So I'm going to ask a sidebar question because now I know why we've been friends for so long, because we are very aligned in this approach. So what I'm hearing is know your audience, know your team, know their strengths, and know their aspirations. What do you do when you have a member of your team or someone that joins your team and they've never been asked that question? They don't know the answer.
Mm-hmm.
They're afraid to even articulate it, or they've never been asked, right? I've worked with a lot of team members where I'm the first boss they had that ever asked them what they wanted. How do you deal with that? How do you go about that? And what advice do you have for other leaders that might be facing that?
Some people never get it. Some people never get it because they've been so indoctrinated that, again, he knows everything. He's in that position. You know, it's the same thing with being a pastor. So some people you're the pastor. You
tell me what to do.
You know, I can't come up with. You're asking me, and I've dealt with that before, even in the church. Oftentimes, it's to me the vulnerability that I bring to the space to help people to understand that as I'm asking you this, or as I'm talking to you, or as I'm challenging you in this way, I'm not doing anything to you that I don't need for me. So again, I'm very sacrificial in that way.
Right.
So to me, I'm not going anywhere, and it's almost like I'm going to love you until I learn you. I'm going to love you till I learn you.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking about some people specifically
Yeah.
that I have challenged in that way. And one in particular, you're right. She was like,
right.
you know, like,
That's a new space. Nobody's asked me that in 20 years.
Like, first of all, like, why are you asking me this? You know,
Yes.
what's this got to do with what I'm doing? It's got everything to do with what you're doing, because you don't want to do this for the rest of your life.
Hell
You're not going to stay here. I don't intend for you to remain where I met you.
Yes.
You're going to go on and do other things, and I need to understand what that is. And so I would stay with them and stay with them and stay with them. And eventually, though, in this particular young lady that I'm thinking about, I remember when I was transitioning from a position, believe it or not, her mother made a statement about my leadership. And she says, I didn't know who you were. Personally, the way I learned was through my daughter.
Yes.
She talked about you all the time.
Yeah.
And this young lady was the hardest initially person that I had to deal with, you know. Now the other person, I did have another hard person I had to deal with who was not going to change. And so she didn't stay there long, just being honest. I mean, you know, but this young lady, I worked on her, and eventually she was able to open up and realize that this dude is really trying to help me. He actually cares.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I think it takes a minute for people to understand that you're not when you're an inclusive leader, you're not self-agenda driven. But to your point around indoctrination, cultures, corporate cultures, company cultures, generationally, you know, you almost think that's the way it is. That's the way it's been. So it's a surprise sometimes, I think, to work for an inclusive leader and know that they're just not all out for themselves. And it does take a minute. So I've walked into organizations and I can quickly see where, okay, this person never had clear goals and objectives. Somebody kept changing the target on them. This person didn't have clear-cut, consistent communication. This person never been developed. So I pause and say, what do they need? And I start with the question, and I'm like, I'm going to keep asking because it's a muscle we have to. Empowerment can be, it's in the eye of the beholder, but the leader has a huge influence on creating the environment.
You got it.
Right? Like, you still got to take the action, but I have to set the stage.
It's hard. It is hard to be a leader when the culture is bending toward
opposite
from what you're... direction. I was thinking, you know, with the hierarchy, you know what I mean?
Yes.
It's bending itself towards top down, you know. It is hard.
Yeah.
And
because you're the anomaly.
I am.
Right? You'll be the anomaly in the organization, right? So that's tough.
And it's not on it's really not on the job description. This part. This part is not on the job
that
description.
is a future podcast conversation because it's interesting. So people mostly are tapped on the shoulder to become a leader in most companies. So it's because of your expertise. But they aren't teaching very commonly, consistently, what it means to be a leader. So you're absolutely right. So let me ask you this. Did you have a role model around inclusive leadership? Something that you can reflect on? You talked about your moment, right? But do you recall, you know, I mean, I know we are in a different part of our career. But can you think back of anybody that demonstrated inclusion as a leader in your, even if maybe even your college years even? Does that anybody stand out for you?
Not really.
So that's interesting conceptually. I think a lot of that might have to do with the culture we came up in, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I recently talked about my inclusive leadership story, and it was for a lady that advocated for me when I wasn't in the room. And just like you lost 15 years, I would have lost that much. But thanks to her, she said something, and it changed the trajectory. Because you could not move up in the organization that I was at the time without working in the field first. And they said, oh, Kelly's a single mom. She can't do that. And she says, well, wait a minute. Well, let's ask her. How do we know she can't?
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So if it wasn't for her, it would have been a huge difference. So it's interesting.
I've not seen it. Well, now I've seen things.
Yeah.
And I probably have seen ingredients, but I've never seen a cake of this. I've never seen it all put together. But I have, and I've even learned, like I said, I understand that sometimes when you look for mentorship or you look for it, sometimes what you get is not what to do, you get what not to do.
Yeah. So you had a lot of what not to do.
I had a lot of that. I had a lot of that. And I've got this church thing, which I don't care what anybody says. Just like you get the Easter poem that teaches you how to do public speaking, and you're in the choir and it teaches you how to control your voice, and then you go off and be a good singer or whatever. There's a lot of leadership lessons in the church too, whether it is the what to do or the what not to do.
Sir.
There's some leadership things there, and I would argue one of the reasons why I don't spend as much time in the church leadership because of the anomaly piece. There's this organizational structure
is not changing.
Yeah, that makes people so passive that it's hard to empower them.
Yeah.
And today's church business is nowhere near the same as it was in the 1960s and 70s. People don't support, people don't, it's just not the same.
Yeah.
And so to think that one person is going to carry that load is like
unrealistic.
You're just gonna kill that person.
Yeah. Well, as we talk about the next generation of leaders, if we've got a young up and coming leader now listening to this conversation, what advice would you give them?
It's tough because the responsibility is not theirs. The responsibility is the adults around them to open them up to being okay with that relationship, that leadership relationship or mentorship relationship.
So it's like the new version of managing up?
Yeah, I would agree.
Okay.
Because I struggle with the ways that a lot of young people want to pull themselves out of the mud. And you've got people like you and me who are, again, anomalies. We're like, why would you do that? You don't have to do that. There's like 50 ways you can get that done without having to go through all of that. But it's not their fault that they're doing that. They've seen so much dysfunction in leadership. They've seen so many people that died with the baton. They never passed it on. Yeah. And so there's a lack of trust.
Yeah.
And because of that, it makes it difficult for me to come around or you to come around and say, here, figure that out. And they're like, figure that out. Like, so like, why? Like, they're suspicious, and they're like, like, why would you, And so I have a lot to say about leadership for young people, but much of what I'm concerned about isn't their fault.
Right.
It's, and we're the sandwich, right? We're the ones stuck in the middle.
Right.
And we too have some trauma around the batons that were never really officially passed. And so we had to go take stuff, right? And so for them, they're so disillusioned. They're like, I don't even want to be a part of it.
So I wasn't even going to go here, but since you did.
Did I go somewhere?
You did. You did, right? The passing of. So why do you think that is? Because, and I don't want to relegate it to certain groups of people, but why do you think there's the it was the resistance, or it is the resistance of people who are in leadership unwilling to pass the baton or to support grooming the next gen.
I don't know. I'm not trying to speak for everybody, and I can't. So I'm not going to try to think that I know everything. But the things that I suspect are, number one, being that person is good. It's just good, right?
Like it feels good.
It's just good.
I like being here. I finally got here.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. and that's one side of it. I think it's just, man, it's good to be able to go someplace and be seated before everybody else. It's good to be recognized. It's good to be acknowledged. It's good. I mean, it just is. And so that's a number one. I think another piece of that is that people who are in leadership from the 60s, 70s, and 80s, that's all they know. And so now you're asking me to put down something I've been doing for all that time. I don't know what else to do. And you've seen people, I've seen it myself. When people retire or they stop doing it, that's when the decline happens, because they've never done anything else. Because they don't know what else to do. So it's hard to give up something when you don't have a hobby or whatever. I
think people don't plan for the next stage. So absolutely.
So I don't know.
I don't have a hobby.
You don't have a hobby. But then there's so many things that just roll around in my head right now. But then there is this. Okay, I'm sorry, but I'm going to say this. There is this generational arrogance.
Okay, say more. What does that mean?
That keeps those who have from feeling like they can trust this other generation with what they feel like they worked for.
That's my belief.
And that creates this thing that often never gets dealt with. And when you don't deal with it, it's like a cancer that grows. And I really feel like that today we have, because again, we're the sandwich, we're in the middle. So we're getting dissed by both sides. But the older generation and the younger generation, when it comes to succession, are not on the same page. I mean, you get it. I don't get my own kids, and that's just one generation. Throw another generation in there, and it's like they really don't, because everything is back in my day. Everything is back in my day. And so they're not talking to each other, and it's getting worse and worse and worse. So, I mean, those are like three things. But there's more. There's way more than that. But
so generational arrogance.
I mean, both of them need to stand down.
I like that. So I think as we move to leaving a legacy, right? We do need to teach future leaders.
Most definitely.
What it's like. And it's very similar, I think, to how I will talk to practitioners. You have to remove yourself out of the way to deal with the greater good, or to deal with the issue we're trying to solve, or the problem itself. So
hold on a second. Let me deal with this real quick, because when we talk about the succession piece, there is, in legacy and all that, there's this 25-year theme, generation. 25. So think about it. 25-year-old, 50-year-old, 75-year-old. In order to maintain anything, you have to respect each one of those generations.
That's right.
Right? So at some point, some babies got to show up in order for them to be there 25 years later to pick up and move things forward. And this idea that I'm going to go get, and I'm 55, and I have no problem saying that, I'm 55, but the idea of me hiring another 55-year-old because we get along, and disrespecting the fact that that's not succession, that's not doing anything, right? Because this person's on the same. Now, here's the bigger picture. The bigger picture is vision. If I have a vision for something that needs to come to fruition, that's going to take time. Well, if I'm 75, how much time do I have to walk out a 25-year vision? None. Right. Or if I'm 50, Do I have 25 years to walk out a vision?
Right.
We need vision cast by a 25-year-old that can be fulfilled within 25 years.
Right.
So that ultimately the next person comes in who casts vision that is relevant to the times, that is relevant to the culture, that is relevant to what's going on, that can be, again, walked out in 25 years. And so there's that thing that's playing against us when we shove all of the vision and the walking out of the vision into the 45, 50, 55, 60. When you got some 25-year-olds that really need to carry that vision out. They've got the energy, they've got the expertise, they've got the time, the runway to do it. And if they don't have everything they need, that's what we're for, to help them walk out that vision.
I think you said it best. Stand down, right?
Both of them.
Which is everybody, right? Right? And then trust.
Yeah.
Right?
That's
because
huge.
You have what I don't have. Right? And I think we're seeing this whole topic the wrong way, right?
Definitely.
We're seeing it as a threat, right? And it's actually a lot easier to talk about it in this generational conversation than anything else, right? But if I trust that I know what I know and you know what you know, then think about what we can build together.
Correct.
And that's truly leaving a legacy, a vision that can be cast, that could actually means that I have to position my successor. I'm thinking about that now, right? As we even are doing these conversations, like who will come behind me? Well, thank you, John. How can our listeners reach you with your many eclectic solopreneur, entrepreneur?
Well, I mean, most often, I tell people just hit me on LinkedIn. You know, I'm just, I think I'm Pastor Girton on LinkedIn and Facebook. I'm Pastor Girton on Facebook. And then, of course, our company, Girton Enterprises, is just girtonenterprises.com. So, you can find everything there.
All right. Thank you, John. I appreciate the discussion.